It was just another quiet evening, the kind where the house felt too big and the silence too loud. My husband had been gone for weeks on another one of his business trips, and I was used to the emptiness by now. But that night, something felt different. The air was heavier, the shadows longer. I was in the kitchen washing dishes when I heard it, a soft, hesitant knock on the front door. My heart skipped a beat. No one ever came by this late. I dried my hands, walked to the door, and opened it to find my best friend's daughter, Emily, standing there. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen, like she'd been crying. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, stepping aside, but as she walked past me, I noticed something strange. She was clutching her phone tightly, her knuckles white, and she wouldn't meet my gaze. That's when I knew. This wasn't just a casual visit. Something was very, very wrong. Life had been quiet, too quiet, since my husband Mark left for his latest business trip. He was always traveling, his job demanding more of his time than our marriage ever could. At first, I tried to fill the silence with distractions, cleaning, binge-watching shows, and even taking up yoga. But no matter how busy I kept myself, the nights were the hardest. The house felt too big, too empty, and the loneliness crept in like an uninvited guest. I missed him, but more than that, I missed the feeling of being needed, of being seen. Emily was my best friend's daughter, and I'd known her since she was a little girl. She was like family to me, the daughter I never had. Her mom, Sarah, and I had been inseparable since college, and when Emily was born, I became her unofficial aunt. Over the years, I'd watched her grow from a shy, awkward kid into a confident young woman. She was smart, kind, and had a way of lighting up a room with her smile. But lately, something about her had changed. She seemed quieter, more reserved, like she was carrying a weight she couldn't quite explain. I'd asked Sarah about it, but she just shrugged it off as typical teenage drama. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That night, when Emily showed up at my door, I knew my instincts had been right. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, her usual spark replaced by a hollow emptiness. I led her to the living room, where she sat on the edge of the couch, her hands trembling as she clutched her phone. I sat across from her, giving her space but also trying to catch her eye. "Emily," I said softly, "what's going on? You can talk to me." She hesitated, her gaze fixed on the floor. "I don't know where to start," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It's just, everything feels so messed up right now." I reached out, placing a hand on her knee. "Whatever it is, you're not alone. I'm here for you." She looked up at me then, her eyes filled with tears, and I could see the fear and confusion swirling inside her. "It's about Mark," she said finally, her voice barely audible. My heart stopped. "Mark, my Mark, what about him?" She took a deep breath, her hands shaking even more. I didn't want to believe it at first, but I think he's been texting me, saying things he shouldn't. The room seemed to spin as her words sank in. Mark, my husband, the man I'd built my life with, the man I trusted more than anyone. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was saying. "What kind of things?" I asked, my voice trembling. Emily hesitated, then unlocked her phone and handed it to me. "Just read for yourself." I took the phone, my hands shaking as I scrolled through the messages. Each word felt like a punch to the gut. Flirty comments, inappropriate jokes, and then something more, something that made my stomach churn. My heart pounded as I read, the words blurring together as tears filled my eyes. How could he? How could he do this to me, to her? I looked up at Emily, my vision blurred with tears. "When did this start?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "A few weeks ago," she said, her voice trembling. At first, I thought it was just him being friendly, but then it got weird. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to hurt you, but I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I felt a mix of emotions, anger, betrayal, but also a strange sense of protectiveness toward Emily. She was just a kid, caught in the middle of something she shouldn't have to deal with. "You did the right thing by telling me," I said, though my voice shook. "This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault." She nodded, but the guilt in her eyes was unmistakable. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want to hurt you." I pulled her into a hug, holding her tightly, as tears streamed down both our faces. In that moment, I wasn't sure what hurt more, the betrayal or the realization that my life was about to change forever. After Emily left that night, I couldn't sleep. The messages she'd shown me played on a loop in my mind, each word cutting deeper than the last. I felt numb, like I was floating outside my own body, watching my life unravel from a distance. Mark was due back in a few days, and I didn't know how to face him. How could I look him in the eye after what I'd seen? How could I pretend everything was okay when it so clearly wasn't? The next morning, I called Sarah. I needed to talk to someone, and she was the only person I could trust. When I told her what had happened, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Are you sure?" she finally asked, her voice tight with disbelief. "I mean, Mark? Really? He's always been so normal." "I know," I said, my voice breaking. "That's what makes it so hard to believe. But I saw the messages, Sarah. They're real." She sighed, and I could hear the worry in her voice. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I need to talk to him, but I'm scared. What if he denies it? What if he tries to turn it around on me?" "You can't let him," Sarah said firmly. "You have to stand your ground. Emily's just a kid, and he took advantage of her. That's not something you can just sweep under the rug." I knew she was right, but the thought of confronting Mark filled me with dread. I spent the next few days in a fog, going through the motions but feeling like a stranger in my own life. When Mark finally came home, I was a bundle of nerves. He walked through the door with his usual smile, dropping his suitcase by the stairs and pulling me into a hug. "I missed you," he said, his voice warm and familiar. I forced a smile, but it felt brittle, like it might shatter at any moment. "I missed you too," I lied, my voice barely above a whisper. That night, as we sat down to dinner, the tension between us was palpable. Mark chatted about his trip, his work, and the people he'd met, but I could barely focus on his words. My mind was racing, trying to find the right moment to bring up what I knew. Finally, as we cleared the table, I took a deep breath and said, "We need to talk." He looked at me, his brow furrowing in concern. "Is everything okay?" I shook my head, my hands trembling as I set the dishes in the sink. "No, Mark, it's not." He followed me into the living room, where I sat on the edge of the couch, my heart pounding. He sat across from me, his expression a mix of confusion and worry. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice gentle. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Emily came to see me the other night," I began, my voice shaking. "She showed me some messages from you." His face went pale, and for a moment he didn't say anything. Then he shook his head, his voice tight. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me, Mark," I said, my voice rising. "I saw them. I read them. How could you do this? How could you do this to me, to her?" He looked down at his hands, his jaw clenched. "It wasn't like that," he said finally, his voice low. "It was just harmless flirting. I didn't mean anything by it. Harmless flirting, I repeated, my voice trembling with anger. She's a kid, Mark. She's my best friend's daughter. How could you think that was okay? He didn't answer, and the silence between us was deafening. I felt a mix of emotions, anger, betrayal, but also a deep, aching sadness. This was the man I'd built my life with, the man I'd trusted more than anyone. How could he do this to me, to us? Over the next few days, the tension between us only grew. Mark tried to apologize, to explain himself, but his words felt hollow. I couldn't look at him without feeling a surge of anger and disgust. I spent most of my time in the guest room, trying to distance myself from him, but it was impossible to escape the weight of what had happened. One night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, there was a soft knock on the door. "Can I come in?" Mark asked, his voice tentative. I didn't answer, but he opened the door anyway, stepping inside and closing it behind him. He sat on the edge of the bed, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I know I messed up," he said finally, his voice breaking. "I know I hurt you, and I'm so sorry, but I love you and I don't want to lose you." I turned to look at him, my eyes filled with tears. "How can you say that?" I asked, my voice trembling. "How can you say you love me when you did something like this?" He reached out, his hand hovering over mine, but I pulled away. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what's wrong with me, but I can't lose you. Please just give me a chance to make this right." I wanted to believe him, to believe that we could fix this, but the betrayal was too fresh, too raw. "I don't know if I can," I said finally, my voice breaking. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." He nodded, his eyes filled with pain, and for a moment, we just sat there in silence, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. Finally, he stood up and walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "I'll sleep on the couch tonight," he said quietly. "But please, just think about what I said." As he closed the door behind him, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. I didn't know what to do, how to move forward. All I knew was that my life had been turned upside down, and I wasn't sure if it would ever be the same again. The days that followed were a blur of silence and tension. Mark and I moved around each other like ghosts, avoiding eye contact and speaking only when necessary. The house, once filled with warmth and laughter, now felt like a prison, its walls closing in on me with every passing hour. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think straight. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, betrayal, heartbreak, and I didn't know how to make it stop. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room staring blankly at the TV, Mark walked in. He looked exhausted, his face pale and drawn, like he hadn't slept in days. He sat down across from me, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "We need to talk," he said finally, his voice heavy with emotion. I didn't respond, but he continued anyway. "I know I've hurt you," he said, his voice trembling, "and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to understand something. What happened with Emily, it wasn't about her. It was about me, about how lost I've been feeling lately." I looked at him then, my eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about?" He took a deep breath, his hands shaking. "I've been struggling with work, with life, with everything. I feel like I'm drowning and I don't know how to make it stop. And when Emily started texting me, it was like a distraction, a way to feel something other than the emptiness inside me." I felt a surge of anger, my hands clenching into fists. "So you used her? To make yourself feel better?" "No," he said quickly, his voice rising. "That's not what I meant. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I don't know. I wasn't thinking. I was selfish and stupid, and I hurt you, and I'll never forgive myself for that. I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. Do you have any idea what this has done to me? To us? How could you do this, Mark? How could you throw everything away like this? He looked down at his hands, his shoulders slumping. I don't know, he whispered. I don't know what's wrong with me. But I love you, and I don't want to lose you. Please, just give me a chance to make this right. I wanted to believe him, to believe that we could fix this, but the pain was too deep, the betrayal too fresh. I don't know if I can, I said finally, my voice breaking. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. He nodded, his eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, we just sat there in silence, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. Finally, he stood up and walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. I'll sleep on the couch tonight, he said quietly. But please, just think about what I said. As he closed the door behind him, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. I didn't know what to do, how to move forward. All I knew was that my life had been turned upside down, and I wasn't sure if it would ever be the same again. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. I reached for it, my heart sinking when I saw Emily's name on the screen. Hello? I answered, my voice groggy. I need to see you, she said, her voice trembling. Can you meet me at the park? I hesitated, my mind racing. Of course, I said finally. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I got dressed quickly, my hands shaking as I pulled on a sweater and grabbed my keys. When I arrived at the park, Emily was sitting on a bench, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She looked up as I approached, her eyes red and swollen from crying. What's wrong? I asked, sitting down beside her. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling. I need to tell you something, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Something I should have told you a long time ago. I felt a knot of dread form in my stomach. What is it? She looked down at her hands, her voice shaking. It's not just the texts, she said finally. There's more, things I didn't tell you before. My heart pounded as I waited for her to continue. What kind of things? She took a deep breath, her eyes filled with tears. He kissed me, she said finally, her voice breaking, at the office party last month. I didn't want to, but he wouldn't stop. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My mind raced, trying to process what she was saying. Mark had kissed her? At a party? In front of other people? How could he do something like that? How could he be so reckless? Why didn't you tell me before? I asked, my voice trembling. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I didn't want to hurt you, she whispered. I thought if I just ignored it, it would go away, but it didn't. And now, I don't know what to do. I pulled her into a hug, holding her tightly as she cried. In that moment, I felt a mix of emotions, anger, betrayal, but also a deep, aching sadness. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about Emily, about the pain she was going through and the guilt she was carrying. You did the right thing by telling me, I said finally, my voice shaking. This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. She nodded, but the guilt in her eyes was unmistakable. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I didn't want to hurt you. I held her tighter, my heart breaking for her. I know, I said softly, and I'm so sorry you had to go through this. As we sat there holding each other, I knew that things would never be the same. The betrayal was too deep, the wounds too fresh. But in that moment, all I could think about was Emily, and how much she had already lost. She was just a kid, caught in the middle of something she shouldn't have to deal with. And as much as I wanted to hate Mark, to walk away and never look back, I knew I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I knew she was going to be okay. But as I sat there, holding her, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, that there was more to this story, more secrets waiting to be uncovered. And as much as I wanted to believe that we could move past this, I knew that the road ahead would be long and painful. But for now, all I could do was hold on and hope that somehow we would find a way to heal. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, but the weight of what had happened never truly lifted. Mark and I continued to live under the same roof, but the distance between us felt insurmountable. We spoke in clipped sentences, our conversations limited to the bare necessities. The house, once filled with warmth and laughter, now felt like a hollow shell, its walls echoing with the silence of everything left unsaid. Emily and I grew closer in the aftermath, our bond strengthened by the shared pain of betrayal. She started therapy, and I was proud of her for taking that step, for facing the trauma head on. But even as she began to heal, I could see the lingering shadows in her eyes, the way she flinched at sudden movements or hesitated before answering her phone. She was trying to move forward, but the scars ran deep, and I knew it would take time for her to fully recover. As for Mark, he tried to make amends. He started going to counseling, both individually and as a couple, but the sessions were tense and often ended in tears. He apologized repeatedly, his words filled with regret. But the trust between us had been shattered, and I wasn't sure if it could ever be repaired. I wanted to believe him, to believe that he was truly sorry, but the memory of his betrayal lingered like a dark cloud, casting a shadow over everything we tried to rebuild. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, staring at the flickering flames in the fireplace, Mark walked in. He hesitated in the doorway, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, before finally speaking. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice tentative. I nodded, gesturing for him to sit down. He took a seat across from me, his eyes fixed on the floor. "I know I've hurt you," he began, his voice trembling. "And I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to know that I'm trying. I'm really trying to be better." I looked at him, my heart aching with a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, but also a flicker of hope. "I know you are," I said finally, my voice soft. "But it's going to take time, Mark. I can't just forget what happened." He nodded, his eyes filled with pain. "I understand," he said quietly, "and I'll wait. However long it takes, I'll wait." We sat there in silence for a while, the crackling of the fire the only sound in the room. I wanted to believe that we could find our way back to each other, that the love we once shared could overcome the pain of betrayal. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. The road ahead would be long and difficult, and there were no guarantees that we would make it through. As the weeks passed, I found myself grappling with a question I couldn't answer. Could I ever truly forgive him? Could I let go of the anger and the hurt and find a way to move forward? Or was I holding on to something that was already broken beyond repair? I didn't have the answers, and maybe I never would. But as I sat there, staring into the flames, I realized that this was only the beginning. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges and uncertainties, and there was no way to predict how it would end. All I could do was take it one day at a time and hope that, somehow, we would find a way to heal. But as much as I wanted to believe in a happy ending, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story, more secrets waiting to be uncovered. And as the fire slowly died down, casting the room into shadows, I knew that the road ahead would be anything but easy. If this story resonated with you, or if you've ever faced a similar situation, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your experiences in the comments below, and let's start a conversation. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more true stories that dive deep into the complexities of relationships, betrayal, and healing. Your support means the world to me, and I can't wait to share more with you. Until next time, take care of yourself, and remember, you're never alone in this journey.